is Neurolanguage Coaching and India. I mean, we all know that neurosciences is taking the education world by storm, and it is impacting every discipline. But I would say that in India, we are less aware of its impact and less aware of its implementation. So we have asked, of course, the best of the best, Rachel, who has kindly obliged to talk to us about neurolanguage coaching, as well as how it is relevant to the Indian market. So she will be in conversation with Revathi and with Mushtaq, who will be adding the Indian perspective to the conversation. And this is a fireside chat, which means we will not have any PowerPoint presentations or anything. It is in complete conversation format, where there will be a question answer session between Revathi, Mushtaq, and Rachel. And towards the end of the session, that is the last 15 minutes, it opens up to the audience, and everyone is free to participate in the conversation, ask questions, talk about it. At 5 o'clock, that is after 1 hour, we close the session formally, but from 5 to 5:30 for another half an hour, it is an informal networking session where we will all be present, the organizers, Rachel, the speakers, and the organizers. And if members of the audience want to, just share their views, have a few more questions, want to chat with us, I mean, we are there and happy to do so. So I will introduce the speakers who really need no introduction, but I'll do that. Well, Rachel Paling is a world-renowned coach, trainer, author, and speaker. And she has created a network of 850 neurolanguage coaches all over the world, over 70 countries. Dr. Revathi Viswanathan, she is a former professor and the former head of the department of a well-known university in India. And today she is a freelance consultant for English language teaching as well as teacher training. And Mushtakhussen is a faculty member at the prestigious BCFAI Business School, where he handles courses in business communication and in soft skills. So a very limited introduction, but they are fantastic people that you'll know from the conversation. And I leave it to them now. I'm looking forward to an exciting afternoon, just as everybody else in the afternoon, in the audience. So over to you, Rachel. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And honestly, for me, it's an honor, and also a beautiful conversation about how we can start to talk about neurolanguage coaching, neuro heart education, and India. I mean, I'm passionate about this question. Firstly, want to say that actually now we are nearly 1,000 neurolanguage coaches worldwide, and extremely grateful to all of the neurolanguage coaches who are out there with all different language combinations. A lot of people question, what is it that we do? And you started, Dalon, by saying that neuroscience is taking the world by storm. We have had a lot of neuroscience for the past 40 years. That's when we really started to get the technology. We started to understand more and more about ourselves, about the brain. And one of my burning questions is, what's the reason that we are not further down the line with this when we've had all of these years of theory and science? And I think one of the major problems that we all have is the implementation. And you've said it exactly. This is the question. How do we implement the science, the theory, and all that we're learning? And for me, that's the passionate part about neurolanguage coaching, because it is about educators implementing the science. It's not just about regurgitating the theory and telling people this is what happens, this is what you should do and you shouldn't do. It's about us living it in everything that we do. It's about us being conscious of the impact that we have, the way that we communicate, the way that we take that learning process. It's about adapting the learning process to how the brain learns, functions, reacts. But it's also about not only the neuroscience, but adding the coaching aspect. So it's about taking the teacher, the trainer, the educator, one step beyond into a different approach, a different way of communicating, a different way of doing. And in some ways, for me, it's about going back to the ancient philosophies, the ancient practices that we all know about, like the Socratic method. And even, you know, in India, you have such beautiful history of teachings and how to teach. And I think it's about capturing a lot of that and bringing it back into what we as educators are doing. But above all, it is about the consciousness and the awareness of the educator and the impact that we can have on the learners. And in a nutshell, that really is neurolanguage coaching. It's about incorporating the neuroscience, not only being able to talk about the neuroscience, but also implementing it, changing the way that we communicate so that we are brain friendly. I know a lot of people don't like that terminology of brain friendly, but it's also about reaching everybody. It's not about being demonstrating our scientific knowledge with scientific terminology. It's about reaching all the educators. We're all different, and we all need to understand the science. So putting it in very simple terms, and for me, the brain friendly is the terminology that describes everything that we do on a very simple level, plus bringing in the coaching and understanding how we as a coach can empower learners. That's coaching. That's really the essence of everything that we're doing. How can we give them back the ownership of the learning process, give them back the autonomy, get them inspired, stimulated, provoking them, and be the soundboard, not the person telling them what to do, giving them all information, but actually being the soundboard and the person who is stimulating that learner to learn. That's neurolanguage coaching. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to whoever would like to jump in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for the insightful information that you shared with us. And now in India, the term NLP, that is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is quite popular. So how do you differentiate NLP with NLC, that is Neuro-Language Coaching?
And many times people think that neurolanguage coaching is based on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and it's not at all. I have never done NLP, so I'm not an expert. So if there are NLP experts in the audience or watching afterwards, my understanding of NLP, when it developed in the 1970s, it really was a way of helping people to modify the way that they communicate, to change behaviors, to change habits, and many times in very many positive ways. That sort of helping people, influencing to get people to get solutions, find results. That's my understanding from the 1970s, how it developed. It was never connected in those early years. As far as I understand, it was never connected to the neuroscientific research. Nowadays, I believe that they are connecting more NLP with the neuroscience. Now, neurolanguage coaching is very much based on the research from the neuroscience and the question, how do we implement that research into the learning process? So we're not there to influence learners, we're not there to change their habits, we're helping them to learn, and in this particular case, learn languages. And now we're actually moving into helping educators of any discipline with the Neuro Heart Education Foundation. But neurolanguage coaching is about what information can we as educators firstly share with our learner about how the brain functions, reacts, and learns? Secondly, how can we implement that in the process? And thirdly, what can we do to provoke connections wherever we can for the learning? And if we have a learner who, for example, is shutting down because they are embarrassed or they're feeling ashamed, or there is an emotional trigger blocking the learning, what can we do as a coach and an educator to help that learner to feel safe, to go into psychological safety and go back to the learning process? That's neurolanguage coaching. Now, there may be some crossovers with how we communicate. I honestly don't know in depth because, as I say, I've never done NLP. But definitely, I do think there is a very big difference because our focus point is the learning. It's not on changing or influencing or persuading them in any way. Mushtaq, does that help a little bit with that difference?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And we could get a lot of inputs on neuro-language coaching. If you don't mind, may I ask one more question?
Yes,
maybe
pleasure.
If you have to quote one more example, like neuro-language coaching in higher education. So what will be that example? So how would you apply neuro-language coaching in higher education?
Honestly, I think there's a lot that we can be applying. Firstly, the way that we communicate. Now, I know in higher education, we work with bigger groups. You know, when I was teaching at universities, in the University of Verona in Italy, I had a group of 120. And I think this is our biggest concern. How do we reach them all? And a lot of the time, you know, we're standing there as a lecturer, but I was always moving around. So I was capturing attention, stimulating, and I was asking open questions to my groups. And when you ask an open question to a group of 100, at first they are shocked because they think, well, who's going to answer? But somebody starts to answer. And then when one starts to interact, then another starts to interact. And you start to interact with a big group. And when you've got an interaction, you've got a totally different dynamic. And I think when you start to interact with a group, you as a coach, there is no judgment. You are absolutely accepting what people say. You're trying to help people to understand from their perspective. We all have a different perspective of life. We all have a different way of interpreting information. So for me, it's important to understand, how can I help you or a group of you to understand this concept? And there is one neuroscientist, James Zull, he talks about the fact that he recognized that explaining actually doesn't work. What we need is them to explain to us, because that means they're putting it in their words. They are interpreting it, not me giving you my interpretation all the time. So yes, it's about developing techniques to get people involved, to get people telling us, to get them sharing what they think. And if we can help them on that way, open questions, interacting, sharing information, getting them to go into smaller groups to share information and then come back. So it is about stimulating even larger groups. And at the same time, with the larger groups, we can be sharing a little bit about the brain science, understanding neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. This is how the brain likes to learn. If everybody is different, let's talk about the different ways that each of you maybe want to learn. So it is opening the discussion as well about the brain and sharing as well what happens when we go into those emotional blocks, and how can we as a group respect each other. And what do you as a group need to feel safe with each other to interact? So yes, there is a lot that we can be bringing in, even with higher education, even with the bigger groups, Mushtaq. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Rachel, I understand neuro-language coaching enhances memory retention. Can you tell us how it happens, and how does it help in creating a new neural network?
You know, I think the interesting thing again is just sharing with each learner that every brain is different. So what may work for one learner may not work with another learner. What works with a child may not work with a teenager, may not work with an adult. So having that interaction and finding out from my learner what works for you, what's going to help you to retain information. Now, definitely we know, and there's a great body of neuroscience out there, especially the part which is called the science of learning. Tracy Tokuhama Espinosa is one of the leaders in that area. You know, the more sensory input, the more emotional the learning is, and I'm talking about positive learning, positive emotions, the more impacting that learning could be. I'm always curious, you know, each and every one of us probably can remember something that we learned from school 40, 50 years ago, which came in instantly. And I think each of us could think back and say, wow, yes, I was sitting in that class, the teacher taught me about that, and I still remember it. Yeah. And the question for each of us is, what provoked that memory retention? And that's the question as an educator that I think it's our mission to think, okay, how do I create those moments with my learners? How can we create continuous moments like that with learners that are going to be impacting? I remember with one lady in Italy some years ago, she had come back to English after many, many years. And we were going through sessions, and in our sessions as neurolanguage coaches, we are tailor-making, personalizing everything to that learner. If there's a problem, we're coming in, we're troubleshooting, we're getting them to tell us, what do you think? What is your starting point here? How do I help you to build on previous knowledge, connect to native language as well? And how do I help you to create new neural networks or supplement networks where you're missing information? And at one point she said to me, Rachel, it's almost like I am totally relearning everything again. And she said, it's amazing the way that we're just talking through it. And I think that's one of the key points, that as a neurolanguage coach, we interact. And that interaction is always about, how can I help you? How can I serve you? And how can I really bring you to understand it? If you understand something, you've got it. If you've got it, you can then use it. So it's about instantly understanding and getting them using what they understand. And that's going to help them to literally come into it. And understanding, you know, for everybody it's different. Maybe the creation of a habit for you could be 7 repetitions, could be 21 repetitions, could be 35. It always depends on the degree to which you're doing it, the priority that your brain says you need this, and then how much you are constantly doing something. It might be that after a few times, it's enough. It might be that it's something that you need to do more and more because the brain, for some reason, there's resistance. So the voyage of discovery is into the learner or the group of learners. And that might also be finding out, what does my learner prefer? What activities does my learner like? What activities are effective for that person? Personally, I know that I do have preferred ways of learning that work for me. If you put me into a lecture theatre where I'm listening, I probably will learn very little because I'm not an auditory learner. I switch off, I go into my own daydreams, and you've lost me. But if you say to me, Rachel, write something down, for me, that's instant connection. And many, many times when I write something down, I've got photographic memory. So we're all different. We all have different ways of learning. Absolutely. Revathi, how does that sound for you?
Yeah, it is quite clear. So it is more to do with helping the student to reflect on the learning process. Is it so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the more that we can understand that learner, the more that we can connect and talk and interact, what's working for you, what's helping you to retain this information, or how can we find different ways for you? And it might be that we have to experiment new ways that the learner has never tried before.
So it goes with the learning strategies as well. Is it so?
Well, you know, learning styles is labeled now as a neuro myth. And as I said, the body of science that is driving at the moment is the science of learning, where they say that we need input from all the different senses, all the different ways of learning are, the more that we have, the better the impact of the learning process. Personally, I have, and I know that I have a preferred way for me. And as a coach, I would always say to have that conversation with a learner, can I just check with you? Is there some way that you know is effective for you to learn? And if there is, how would you feel if we really tap into that and we get you learning? So I think it's about finding out, we're all different. And this is where I say that, yes, neuroscience is fantastic, but neuroscience is referring to putting everybody in a box. And every single brain is different. How can we all fit into one box? That's impossible. And this is where, as a coach, we need to understand each other. And I think, you know, on a worldwide level, it's really about how do we communicate with each other and respect the differences, respect the diversity. You know, we talk about neurodiversity, but at the same time, we say, this is how it should be for everybody. I think that's a dichotomy.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more question, Rachel, for you.
Yes.
So again, it is in Indian context. So as you know, India is a multilingual country, and you can just check with everyone. So all of us can easily speak 2 to 3 languages. Okay.
Yes.
So is multilingualism an aid or an obstacle for NLC?
Well, firstly, I want to say that you all have the most fascinating, awesome, multilingual brains. Really. I mean, it's phenomenal, the brain power that you all have. You know, multilinguals, bilinguals, we definitely have a different brain. We have more gray matter, more white matter. You're able to multitask better. And actually, I think, you know, for me, it's fascinating that you do have so many different languages. And you do have, I'm going to say, that capacity from being a child to come into different languages. So the code switching in the brain, the capacity of the brain is phenomenal. Now, I actually think that is a great advantage, because from being a child, all of you are exposed to linguist capacities. You are open to learning new languages. You're open to that diversity. And it's interesting as well, you know, since 2016, we do have the research in neuroscience demonstrating that when we learn a new language, our brain is trying to scaffold from previous knowledge. All of you have varied previous knowledge. And I know when I've worked with neurolanguage coaches that come from India, we've gone into this amazing conversation about how is this different? How is it similar? Where is it different in English? Where is it different in your language? And we've come to the most fascinating insights, amazing language connections that you instantly come into understanding, okay, now I understand how you think, how you create the language. So I actually would say it's an advantage. All of that talent that you all have with languages, phenomenal. I take my hat off to you all.
Thank you. Okay, so that means, I mean, it might help us developing our creativity and critical thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, they say learning a language is one of the best things that we can do as we get older, because it's almost like a brain gym. And multilingual brains, bilingual brains have that capacity for multitasking much more than monolingual brains. We have better cognitive skills, better communication skills. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, if you think about the speed at which our brains are going into the different languages, the white matter, the conductivity is phenomenal. Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Rachel, what would you advocate to the English language teachers who have not undergone this training, particular coaching, for them to develop this skill as well as to train the students after getting the skill of coaching the students? What would you advocate? This is for the benefit of all English teachers in India.
Right. I think a little bit of research into the differences between traditional teaching and coaching. What is a coach? One of the, I'm going to say, misconceptions is that coaching is about being a sports coach and telling people what to do. That actually is not what we are following as life coaches or business coaches. As a coach, it's about understanding how to provoke, stimulate, and be a soundboard. So it's about not telling what to do. It's about helping people to find their own way, to find their own path, to create their own goals. Yes, we can be the experts steering them in the background a little bit. We are the GPS in that process, but they are the ones that are taking the ownership and driving that process. So I think a little bit of research into what does coaching mean first. Secondly, I want to say that worldwide, there is definitely a movement where many of you as educators are intuitively coming into a different process. Intuitively, many of you are coming into being a coach. Because I think what's happening is we're all trying to see, how do we move forward? Because many of our learners have changed. Many of our children are totally different nowadays with new technology. You know, you've got babies of 18 months who are coming onto iPads. Their brains are totally different nowadays. And we're living as well at the moment, we're living through very serious times with pandemic, with trauma. And I think all the educators and teachers all over the world are trying to find how to adapt intuitively to the world of today. So many are already coming into that coaching approach. Now, I would say, as well as a little bit of research, as well as recognizing what you are already doing, I would also say it's about for us to become more aware of how we are communicating, how we're asking questions, how we are helping learners. And the awareness starts with us. So researching about the brain, researching how the brain learns, researching what's the impact when people go into that emotional trigger. How can we help people around those moments? So I think that is the start point for anybody that wants to go deeper into this topic by themselves. And yes, fantastic. It starts with us. The more that we become aware, the more that we can help the learners, and the learners of any age. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I ask you one more question relating to coaching? You say this neuro-language coaching focuses on grammar. That's what I understand. Normally, when we develop the skills among the students, we don't give, particularly say, for example, speaking, we don't give much importance to the framing grammatically correct sentences. We focus more on the fluency because we would like our students to talk. But when you focus on grammar in coaching, how does it really help in developing the skill?
So firstly, maybe let's just break that myth down a little bit. We don't just focus on the grammar in neurolanguage coaching. Neurolanguage coaching is about the holistic approach to language. And that means all of the components, whether it is with we call it. Now, for those who are, I always call us Stephen Krashen babies. If you are a Stephen Krashen fan, then we're looking about language learning and language acquisition. It's the same thing, mechanical mastery. And if we're looking in a different perspective, it's about explicit learning, implicit learning. So explicit, where we're going into the rules, the theory, the information, and implicit, where we're subconsciously taking that language in. So language learning, I think we have to understand that it is a very holistic learning process. As children, we probably take 4 or 5 years to learn our native language, and we're doing it from the implicit learning perspective. As we get older, after the age of 8, 9, 10, when we start to develop the reasoning and the executive functions, language learning also becomes something that we can do mechanically. Often, as an adult, we think that learning a language is about grammar. It's not. It's about all of the different aspects. So I would always say that we, as neurolanguage coaches, we're trying to advocate all the learning process. So a little bit of the mechanical side, and then, yes, we want you to use it to get into that mastery mode. So in fact, we look at setting goals from both perspectives. One perspective is to get into that mechanical side where you have, let's say, the gaps or the knowledge is missing, or we can help you to connect in that way with grammatical areas. And the other is the mastery goal, where we want you to get in the flow and into the language and speaking and using it into those situations where you are going to need it. So we have both perspectives. Now, when we do go into grammar, we do not do it with the books. We do it through interaction. And we do it by breaking the grammar down, trying to find out what you know first, and then trying to get you to build on what you already know. And if you don't know it, then we're creating new networks and getting you into it as quickly as we can. And does that help a little bit, Revathi, to hopefully to bring in that sort of holistic approach?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, with pleasure.
Okay, so one more final question from my end before participants ask the questions further. So Indian students taking ownership of their learning are used to being spoon-fed or rote learning. So what is NLC in that context?
May I say it's not only that sort of Indian perspective. I think it's a worldwide perspective. I think a lot of learners worldwide have this concept that learning is about receiving from the teacher and only from the teacher, and that's how we learn. And definitely what we are trying to do is turn that around. We've had perhaps 200 years of passive learners, of the learner being told, you sit there and I tell you, and then you get it. And now we're moving back into, as we said earlier, you know, the older ways, the Socratic ways, the ancient ways of getting people to interact, to talk. I always used to love this fact that Socrates would bite his lip to get others talking. And in some ways, as educators today, that's what we're going to be doing. We're putting on the brakes, we're becoming more silent, and we're becoming more provocative to get them to take ownership, to interact with us, and really getting them to understand that learning is their process. Yes, we can help them, we can accompany them, we can support them, but we cannot do it for them. And we, as teachers, have to start to understand what we need to let go of. In the neuroscience, Doyle has a very important phrase, if you like, a sentence that I love, and I've changed it a little bit, but it in essence, he says, the person doing it learns it. So to learn anything in life, you have to do it. If I'm doing it, you're not learning. So what can I do to stop me doing it and get you doing it so that it's you making those connections? And I think that's the question for all teachers. You know, how much are we preparing? How much are we doing? What could we get them to do and prepare and then discuss and then bring out? And that's the real question of stopping the spoon feed and getting them to. Also, I think it's a question that, you know, as teachers, letting go of our need to demonstrate what we know. I always say to the coaches, you know, you are the expert. You don't have to demonstrate anything. You are the expert, and it's about being in our equanimity, very quiet, very balanced. We don't need to demonstrate. We don't need to show off. What we need is to bring out that expertise when they need it from us, and get them to demonstrate what they know and try to help them more fill in the gaps of what they don't know.
Maybe helping hand, spoon feeding could be replaced with helping hand.
Absolutely, I love that. Yes, definitely. You know, that the coach who is really there, I'm here for you whenever you need me, I'm here. And we're also, I think, sensitive enough to know when to jump in and when not to jump in, when we know that they can do it by themselves. A little bit like parents, you know, when you're letting go of your children. It's not easy.
Thank you.
So Revathi, Mushtaq, with your permission, may I open it up to the audience?
Sure, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, sure, great. So I see one question in the chat box, which is from Ishita. And for the others too, you may want to put it in the chat box, or you may just want to unmute yourselves and speak. So Ishita, rather than me reading out your question, would you like to unmute and ask that question? What about motivation?
I think it was Rupa, Dolon. It was Rupa's
it
question.
was Rupa's question. I'm so sorry. I thought it.
Rupa, would you go ahead and ask the question?
Yeah. Okay. So Rachel, you were talking, from what I understood of what you were saying, motivation plays a big role in learning, right? Language or anything else. So in neuro-language learning, how is motivation different there from traditional learning? And what role, and where does the onus lie, on the teacher or the student? How do you create that sense of motivation, and how is it different from traditional methods of learning?
Definitely, I think firstly, it's about understanding what does motivation mean. And here we have a lot of confusion, because I hear a lot of teachers saying, I motivate my learners. And that actually is something that we cannot do. I cannot change the internal state of other people. If you have something that's motivating you, it's your internal state. I can entertain you, I can amuse you, I can bring you a very joyful, fun learning process, but that doesn't mean that I motivate you. If we come to the brutal honesty of what is motivation, we go to the research, we see that internal motivation is absolutely the greatest driving force. If we have something that is really internally burning us to do something, we will do it. And the question is for us as educators to understand, how do we help people to tap into their inner motivation? And if it's not something inner, if it's an external factor that's motivating, maybe you want a promotion, maybe you want to relocate, maybe you want to achieve something, then how do I connect my learner to something that's going to bring the passion and the energy into that learning process? So I always say it's about distinguishing between the reasons for doing something and the passion and energy and drive to achieve something. That, for me, is motivation. And it's not easy to distinguish the difference. And there I would say, as educators, we do have to start to ask ourselves, is my learner here because there's a reason only? Maybe also there isn't a reason. They're being sent, their boss or their parents, or they've got to do an exam. It could be that there is nothing that would excite my learner. And then it's about being honest and really coming into that, I'm sorry that you're being forced to do this. I'm sorry that you don't have anything that's driving you to be here. And maybe having that conversation to see if there could be something. As a coach, creating those questions which are going to take my learner into vision. Imagine that you are absolutely fluent with this. How's it going to change your life? Where's it going to take you? What's it going to bring you? What doors is it going to open for you? And that will probably stimulate some sort of vision, passion. And then we start to get a different dynamic in the learning process. So yes, I do think it's essential to have that honest conversation with our learners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. We have another very interesting question there from Deepa. Deepa, would you like to unmute and ask the question?
Sure, Dolon. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Thank you. I enjoyed the talk. My question is related to learning language in the context of a school, so young children. And the question that I've asked is, often, in a school system, there is a set curriculum and a fixed time period to cover whatever is in that curriculum. And even teachers who have the best intention at heart, they feel the pressure.
Yeah.
And they then, fall back to a more easier way of teaching, which is teaching one way. Where the meaningful, the conversations that you talked about may not be possible. What advice would you have for teachers who do really want the best for their learners, but then they also are expected to complete that syllabus? That pressure is very real. Because conversations take time. Allowing the learner to progress at his or her own pace, that takes time. And you have someone breathing down your neck to say, hey, show me the test results that show that the learner has learned this in the 1 month that I gave you to teach nouns, for example, or verbs. That's my question. Yeah.
And it's, thank you for the question. It really is, I would say, a problem of, as you said, conflict between syllabus, school, and getting people to really come into learning and living a language. And how many people come out of school and they cannot speak or remember what they've learned?
Absolutely.
And I would actually wonder how we can change the systems, how we can change the syllabus, how we can change the approach to languages. And little by little, I think it is about all of you as experts to be bringing a little bit this question to what can we do to change the systems? Personally, I think the more teachers, trainers, educators start changing themselves, the more that we will be to then start to change the systems. Now, one of the interesting questions could be, if I've got a group of learners, and yes, I've got a syllabus, and yes, we've got exams to do, what can we do with that group to help that group to actually learn as a team? And throw the question open to the classroom to say, right, everybody, this is where we've got to get to. This is what we've got to get you learning. Now, what can we all do to get to that point? That you're all going to learn, you're going to help each other. When you're not with me, what can you do when you're away from me? What can get you stimulated to do a lot more when we're not in class?
Okay.
And I think that's one of the key points, that, learning should not be just 1 hour every week in the classroom. It should be continuous. These kids, if we're talking about kids or university students, there could be study groups in the background. There could be sort of the mission of watching a film in the background, reading a book, doing something that they love. Maybe even if they're playing video games, a video game in English. Go away, discover, come back, tell us about it. What did you learn? Which nouns were in it? Those sort of things are going to stimulate children outside.
Right.
And then the children are going to be incorporating the syllabus much faster, because in the syllabus, they're living it. And they're doing it with each other together, exploring it in the classroom. So I think it's about being creative, being imaginative, but also for me, the key term is teamwork, team learning. And especially with language, language is it's an embarrassing thing to learn for all of us.
Yeah.
So how can we help kids to take it into fun and that sort of helping them with those emotional moments and triggers? And if one person doesn't get it, then how can we help that person?
That's right. So,
yes.
So if I may paraphrase, just to see if I've understood, what you suggest is maybe allowing the learner to take some responsibility for learning, and even though you are say in the position of power, because you are the teacher, you actually you discuss with your class before you say, okay, today we are going to learn this. And simply just then, start with doing that. Instead, you spend some time talking to them and bringing them to the same page that we have to achieve this.
Yeah.
So let's see what we can do together.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
also, what can you do? I think the other big takeaway from me is what can you do even if I'm not there around you?
That's right.
To learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it could be that question, okay, by next week, everybody, you have got to have learned all of this. How are you going to do it? How are we going to do it together now? How are you going to do it through the week so that next week when we come in, all of you have got this and we can move on? And what can we do that you are coming together as a team? Or maybe small groups helping each other in the background. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there any other question someone would like to ask?
Yes, I have one question.
Yes, please go.
Rachel, is neurolanguage coaching tailored specifically for English language teachers and trainers and coaches? Or can anyone who's a native English speaker also aspire to become an NLC coach? Say someone from someone like me, for example. I'm not an English teacher or a formal English educationist, but because of my love for the English language and because it's my native language, I would like to sort of aspire to become a coach if you think, if you believe that it is possible for me to take it up as well. And that of course goes for anyone who's a native English speaker. So yeah, they would be interested.
Yes. So firstly, just to clarify, we actually have teacher trainers from multiple languages now.
Okay.
So it's not just confined to English. We have neurolanguage coaches for Russian, German, Spanish, Italian, all the languages. From the language perspective, we always say that there is a criteria to become a neurolanguage coach when you are dealing with delivery and learning of language, whatever that language is. So we ask for either the experience as a teacher or the qualification of language. Because when you are a neurolanguage coach, as I said before, we don't work with books. And for this reason, we need to understand about the mechanical side of language. How does language come together? We need to have that knowledge to be able to then bring and help and steer the learners. So yes, there is criteria to become a neurolanguage coach. Now, on the other side, Colin, we're now developing a new program, which is called Neuro Heart Educators. And this is about becoming a coach, a Neuro Heart educational coach. And this is going to be for any teachers of any discipline, whether they are maths, physics, whatever, physical education. It really is going to be the perspective of bringing the neuroscience, the heart science, the coaching into educational processes. So whether you are a language expert or a teacher, trainer, educator of any other discipline, there is definitely a course that you could take. So yes.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Thank you. Yes.
Just to add, this new course, we are going to be starting to deliver it. And it is also going to be a course that we can deliver through the Neuro Heart Education Foundation. And the idea will be that this particular course will be open to schools, institutions, and universities and offered through the foundation with very subsidized rates, or it will be funded by others. And it is that question of how we can bring this out more and more to teachers, trainers, and educators worldwide without the teachers, trainers, and educators having to pay that we have that subsidy and funding from others who are supporting this new way of delivering teaching. That will be...
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Yes.
We are coming close to the end of the formal session, but we do have another 30 minutes because I think there is enough conversation going and we can't really stop now. But however, I wanted to thank everyone in the audience who has attended. Please do stay back, for an informal networking after this. And the feedback form is in the chat box. The link, do fill in the feedback form for today's session. And we have our upcoming webinar. Next webinar is in November, which is about the 21st century skills, actually. And we want to talk about grammar. What is its role today? Does it exist? Does it not exist? How important is it? So that will be our next webinar. And to end, we would like to share a short video on BCFAI. BCFAI is a very new platform. We are just about growing. So we'd like to share a video which shows the vision and mission of BCFAI, and those who are not members as yet, do become members. And I do hope there will be something that we can contribute to. So Rupa, if you could share the video of BCFAI.
I don't think the sound is coming.
Yes, Dolon, I can't hear either.
I think now we have the sound. Yes. Thank you, everyone. And tomorrow is Teachers' Day, and everyone present here today is connected to the teaching field. And I think teachers have done a fabulous job over the last 1.5 years, considering this huge and sudden shift that one has had to make. I mean, straight from being in face-to-face sessions for the majority of teachers, one has been plonked into the virtual world, and teachers have coped. So I think it's a huge thing. So happy Teachers' Day to everyone. And
Teachers' Day.